All right, welcome to Beyond the Forbidden. Today on the show, I got Preston Dennett. You can go to Preston UFO. I believe that's the website, but man, he's got a bunch of books. I've been wanting to get him on for a while. And a lot of you that have been following me on Facebook, YouTube, especially Facebook, I've had people that's mentioned him before over the years. And I've been following his work for quite some time. But anyways, for everybody that's new to the Facebook page, appreciate it. We're pushing 100,000, and to the Telegram page. And but yeah, Preston, man, it's a treat and honor. Thank you for coming on, man. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on. How are you doing?
Good. Man, it's can't go wrong with a cup of Joe. But yeah, this is definitely gonna be a treat. The next hour and 15 minutes, definitely gonna be a treat. And what I like about your research is that you don't just stick with one particular topic, one subject with it when it comes to the paranormal, UFOs. You know, you go into many avenues within the paranormal, and I like that. And that's kind of what I want to be talking about, kind of maybe a little bit of mixture of many of your books. And for everybody that's listening or watching, because this will be going on podcast apps also, audio only. I will give the links and everything about Preston, the books, everything, his website in the description below. But Preston, what I know you get this, but let's go and get this out in case people that don't know who you are. What got you inspired in this field of research? And I guess what inspired you? And what was that spark that told you, like, man, we're not alone, like something's going on?
Yeah, I can pinpoint it exactly, actually, because I came into this field very skeptical. I was pretty young, actually. It was 1986. Gosh, it's quite some time ago. I was 21 years old, and a news report came on about a sighting over Alaska. Captain Kenju Terochi was in his commercial airliner with his crew and sighted two very large walnut-shaped objects, bigger than his commercial jet. Tracked his jet for I think it was over an hour, many miles. Appeared on radar, was on the FAA radar, though they later denied this, called it split images. There were ground witnesses as well, so it was a great case. But the news report itself wasn't more than a minute long. It was very kind of jokey and skeptical. But they did show this picture of this pilot, and I later learned this is a very well-known, very well-verified case. But at the time, there was none of this information. It was just a really brief report. I remember looking at this pilot, Captain Kenju Terochi, thinking, what an idiot. I don't mean to be rude, but that's kind of what I thought. That people who thought they saw UFOs were lying, hallucinating, misperceiving. So I thought, well, this guy's throwing his job away, which turned out to be true. He was grounded. And I thought, why would he do that? What would motivate him to go public with this obviously ridiculous story? And I remember some years earlier, my older brother, Mark, he's, I think, about 5 years older than I am. I have 5 brothers and sisters, so there's a few of us.
Wow.
And I thought they were all skeptical. Turned out I was wrong about that. Certainly,
I was just about to ask you about that. How did your family think of you and of your field of research?
Yeah, they were not happy. Most of them, they thought I'd lost my mind, except Mark, because he'd seen one years earlier when I was just a young teenager. He came running into the house. I saw a UFO. I remember we all kind of just looked at him and rolled our eyes and said, go away, shut up. There are no such things. Stop being an idiot. But after I heard this report on the news, I don't know why, but I went up to him and I asked him, what did you see? And he was excited that I was ready to listen, and immediately described this really incredible encounter where he was with his 2 friends, Bill and Greg, who I knew. And they were driving along in their Volkswagen microbus down Reseda Boulevard here in Southern California, where I was back then. And came upon this object at treetop level, metallic. It had a little dome on top, lights on it, totally silent. And they chased it in their car for a good 10 or 15 minutes and passed other cars chasing it. So there was a bunch of people looking at this. I'm like, Mark, you're kidding me. Like, I tried to tell you. He says, you don't believe me? Ask Phil, ask Greg. They'll tell you the same thing. And I did know them, and I did end up calling them. And they did say the same thing. And I'm like, oh, that's not lying. I know he's not lying. I know he's not misperceiving. Don't think he's hallucinating. So what's going on here? I just couldn't wrap my head around it being actual ETs at that point, even though it was pretty clear to me it was. So I started asking other people, found out my sister-in-law, my other brother's wife, had seen a UFO over Van Nuys Air Force Reserve Base. And she described sort of these 3 glowing objects that were hovering. And I'm like, really? Are you kidding me? And she's like, I'm telling you the truth. If you don't believe me, ask Adlai, her friend, who I also knew, and I called him too. And it just kind of rolled out from there. I found out I had 2-3 friends who had major encounters. One had missing time. The time I worked at a business office, and I sat next to this lady and knew her really well. I'm like, what do you think of UFOs? She says, oh, me and my whole family watched one. I'm like, really? She's like, yeah, up in the San Bernardino Mountains. They were out camping, and this little lighted object started darting around, stopping, zipping across the sky. She says we all watched it for over an hour. And
Wow.
in walks Dorothy. And if you knew Dorothy, you'd love her. She's very unfiltered.
Like my mother. It's just like my mother.
Swears like a sailor, funny as hell.
Mm-hmm.
Says UFOs. One followed us home from the library. I'm like, what, Dorothy? What? And she described another really incredible encounter. Their friend and her mom, and it followed their car home from the library in Southern California. She says, Preston, it's weird. We live 5 minutes away. I know exactly the time we left the library, right when it closed, 9 p.m. Got home, ran in the house, watched this silver metallic disc, colored lights, zip off, straight up, turned to a little dot in the sky and was gone. And she turns to the clock and says, it's 10:15. She says, I don't know where the time went. And by that point, I'd picked up, the book Missing Time by Bud Hopkins and a couple of other books. There weren't a lot of books back then, but there were some. I'm like, Dorothy, you know what missing time means? It's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, you may have been taken on board. And she kind of turned a little pale and said, you're kidding. I'm like, no, this is a pattern. So yeah, it hit home for me. It was not good news as far as I was concerned. I was scandalized. I was angry. I asked them all, like, why didn't you tell me? I said, you would not have believed me. They were right. I wouldn't have. But yeah, it was upsetting. It wasn't
how does your family feel about the subject now? I'm asking this stuff because, man, the only person in my family, my mother somewhat knows I'm into conspiracies and stuff like that. She don't know what. She don't even know what I do. But if they find me on Facebook or YouTube or whatever, good. But the thing is, I'm sure you've been there. You're not going to wake people up to subjects, whatever it is, whatever subject, paranormal, other conspiracy, whatever it is. People, because first people is just going to be either mad or pissed off because why the government lied to them, or that you're crazy, just like you said a while ago. And I just don't. That's the reason why my wife knows everything I do. I'm not going to keep nothing from her. But I know a lot of people in my family aren't ready to hear a lot of these things. That's why I ask you, how does your family feel about it now?
Yeah, now they're okay with it. And they're pretty much, I hate the word believers, but yeah. Because initially, no, they were not happy. And my dad thought I'd lost my mind. My mom had passed away, so I never really got an opportunity. My older brother, Jamie, was very reluctantly talking about it, and I eventually convinced him. Stephen, my other brother, did not want to hear it. I mean, they just didn't want to hear it. And they're like, stop talking about this.
Yeah.
But after, I finally got a hold of a police tape that had been leaked out of a police station. I played it for my brother, Stephen. And he's like, okay, I think he might be right that they're real.
Mm-hmm.
I started giving them the evidence. I'm like, listen, this is a real thing. You've got to pay attention. I was not shy about it. I was a little bit preachy even, which I'm not now, because if they don't want to hear it, fine.
Yeah. I'm the same way. Yeah. Because that's usually why I just don't even say anything. Now, if they start talking about subjects of my curiosity, then I'll give them everything, But I guess after all these years of your research, many books later, many interviews later, other appearances, what percentage do you think that these objects, okay, let's say the ones that are reported either by MUFON or others, well, what percentage do you believe are extraterrestrial compared to our own?
That's a really difficult question to ask.
Give me your gut. Give me what your gut
I
says.
would say it's a good 80%. Back then, more so. These days, it could be more government than people suspect, because I know we do have this technology, and I think our government is ramping up sort of a disinformation campaign with this.
With the UAPs and all that?
Yeah. I mean, we know the TR3B and other things are absolutely us. But back in the 80s and 90s, I'd say the vast majority of what people were seeing was ET. And that's exactly what I think we're dealing with. People from other planets, not some interdimensional phenomena that's wearing different masks, as some researchers have postulated.
Yeah, and to go along with that, I just posted on the Telegram page yesterday. It's a quote from Jacques Vallée. Human beings are under control of a strange force that bends them in absurd ways, forcing them to play a role in a bizarre game of deception. And I believe that we've been visited for a very long time, and a lot of the UFOs out there possibly could very well be extraterrestrial, but a lot of them are also the ones that we've been seeing, like these UAPs. I believe that we had the technology, but
Yeah.
but the only thing I can't wrap my head around, Preston, is why. Of course, the stupid question we've heard a million times: why don't they land on the White House lawn? I believe that's well. I don't know. I can't wrap my head around. I know they're here, but what's the game being played? I feel like there's a chess game going on, like either the hybridization programs, maybe just slow drop disclosure process, maybe to this to eventually say that they're here. Is the government working alongside with them? Either underground bases. Maybe that's the reason why a lot of these people go missing, because they're actually slave laborers down there. Possibilities are endless. What does your gut tell you when it comes to why haven't they shown themselves physically, and are they working alongside certain rogue elements within the government and possibly the world?
Yeah, I don't think there's any really good reporting on that to say that ETs are working along with government. I think a lot of that is probably disinformation, because we know that is rife in this community.
Yeah, a lot of it.
Europe is no joke, and our tax dollars and a huge amount of the black budget is going towards this subject, studying it and for putting forth I believe, this is my assessment, an ET threat narrative, which is not supported by the actual evidence. But I think if you actually study the contactee accounts, that's where I've concentrated most of my research, is talking to the people who claim contact, direct face-to-face contact, onboard experiences. There is clearly an agenda to sort of part of the ETs to slowly acclimatize us to their presence. That has been their agenda since at least the modern age of the UFOs, the 1940s. I think they know better than to try to land on the White House lawn, because they did. They did try to do that. They didn't land.
1950s.
Right. 54,
Yeah.
I think it was. They didn't land,
Somewhat.
but
Yeah.
probably they would have if we were much more amenable to their presence. But we chased after them with jets. And we have not been a friendly species to them. We have been hostile towards them. In fact, we tried to shoot them down throughout the 1950s and stopped doing that, as far as I know, to a large extent. But it's clear that the ETs have been doing what researchers call displays. I think Frank Salisbury, who wrote the Utah UFO display, a biologist and professor from Utah, was the first to coin that term. Because UFOs generally don't want to be seen. You can't just go out and be like, hey, look, there is one. But they do. They put on these absolute presentations, displays, like the Hudson Valley wave is a good example, or the Gulf Breeze wave, or France had a wave in 1954 that made it absolutely undeniable to that government that something was going on. Mexico City, Belgium, over and over again, they will come down, sometimes in large numbers, but certainly in view of a large amount of people, and make it absolutely undeniable that they're here. And I did a book on schoolyard UFO encounters, because I'm sure you've heard of the famous Rua, Zimbabwe case.
Yeah.
With
the new documentary just came out this year, I believe.
Yeah.
Well, it's just revamped, modernized pretty much the accounts from back then with better picture quality and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a good example, though, of coming down over a large group of people, children, yes, but landing. I mean, this was a big case.
How can you deny that? Like, if you're a skeptic or a non-believer, how can you say all these kids are just making this crap up? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like maybe one, maybe two, maybe,
It's such a great case. And I immediately thought of Australia's most famous and widely viewed case, Westall High School. And it was pretty much the same thing. They didn't see beings in that one, but
give us a little rundown on that. Yeah, because I know the name, but it's not donging on me off the top of my head.
Yeah, this is in Melbourne, 1966, Westall High School. Some 400 students and teachers, by the way, saw multiple objects. At least two of them landed next to the school. People came up and right upon this landed object, there were landing traces. This is extremely well verified, very widely viewed, absolutely undeniable, and a really good example of one of these displays. And it rang a bell with me because that happened in Opelika, Florida in 1967, 1 year later to the day, which was really synchronous and really had me questioning what's going on here, because it was just 2 weeks before the Melbourne Westall High School case that Hillsdale, Michigan had a huge wave, and there was an incident over Hillsdale College, again, over a school, over young people, and 80 students, the faculty and police saw an object hover for 2 hours, and it landed. A lot of people don't know that, but it landed next to the school. And so these are just the schoolyard cases. I ended up writing a book about UFOs hovering over, of all places. This kind of made me laugh when I found out, drive-in movie theaters. And that slid completely under the radar, I think, even among UFO researchers. But I found 100 cases. So these are good examples of what ETs are doing, a publicity campaign of announcing it's a grassroots movement, I think. You've heard about the 1954 landing at Edwards Air Force Base?
Yes. For the ones that aren't familiar with that, go ahead and give us a little rundown on that also, Preston, because that's a really good one right there. That's right there with Zimbabwe to me. Like when it comes to, it's hard to beat Zimbabwe, with the school children when it comes to cases, but yeah, go and give a rundown to people that are unfamiliar with that, Preston.
Yeah, I studied that one because, being based in California, and one of my first books was UFOs over California. And so I started, collecting all the accounts in a historical way, trying to be very just factual and presenting just the actual known information. And Edwards Air Force Base was a UFO magnet, had sightings from the beginning, not only sightings, landings. There was a landing on the base itself that was filmed. And astronaut Gordon Cooper talked about this, said he actually saw the film. But in 1954, there was apparently, allegedly, this is a controversial case, but the reporting on this is really good, coming from a number of inside sources, a number of UFO researchers. And the research that's going into this now is still verifying that this took place. And in a nutshell, Eisenhower was there, as were leaders in business and science and religion and politics. When multiple craft came down, ETs came down, and they had a face-to-face diplomatic meeting. And this is one good example of interfacing in sort of a diplomatic way, where ETs are, I don't want to say working with government, but meeting with them certainly. And is allegedly what happened there is we were being warned against our use of nuclear weapons and told that this is something that is potentially extremely harmful and we should stop. And we did not want to do this. And they said, you really need to disclose. And this was another thing we did not want to do. Or I should say Eisenhower. I'm all for it.
Yeah, for real.
Right? And I think when that became an impasse, this is when we started to see a ramping up of display types of activity. And this is when we started to have a lot more.
Especially during the Cold War.
Right.
Yeah.
People started being taken on board in much larger numbers and having, face-to-face meetings. And this became a big part of the ET agenda to, I think, at some point, yes, to do an official landing. But they know better than to come down and land in a society that is just not quite ready.
I totally agree. And I don't want to get on this, what I'm about to say, but do you think that some people say there are no nukes or they will never be a nuclear war because they will not let it happen? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, we had one and they let it happen. And I think, from a contactee's perspective, I asked about this because I did interview a lady. She's the subject of my latest book, or one of my latest books. It's called Symmetry, A True UFO Adventure. She's a fully conscious contactee. So she's able to really have deep conversations. And I've talked to a lot of people who have had full-on conversations. And the ETs talked about this with her. And they said, essentially we have to learn our lesson. They did not stop that because if they had, we would never have learned. We would have continued our nuclear program. And I don't think we can depend on them to stop a nuclear war. We have to solve our own problems. Many contactees have gotten that message, but I think they're doing their very best to tell people. I can tell you without reservation, conclusively, that is one of their number one messages. I hear it all the time from people that the ETs told them, what are you doing with nuclear power? And I'll point to the Malmstrom incident of 1967, March, which is very well known in this field. And I talked to a first-hand witness, Mel Hansen, who came forward when he heard it on, I think it was Unsolved Mysteries on TV. He's like, oh, guess I can talk about this now, because he did sign an NDA.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people are talking now, and then they're just throwing caution to the wind. They're like, I've had people on their deathbed, no joke, contact me saying, I need to do my part.
Are these contactees that are on deathbed or other like?
But often government insiders, I guess I would call them.
Yeah.
And he was a witness to the Malmstrom incident where UFOs came down and basically shut down our nuclear tipped ICBM intercontinental ballistic missiles, which was clearly a message.
Mm-hmm.
And just to cap that off, not too long ago, I had a guy from England call me. I didn't know him. He didn't know me initially, but he had had an encounter that morning, and the ETs told him, gave him that message that we are messing around with nuclear power, and this could cause all kinds of problems. And he called, I basically counseled him. That's my primary purpose when people call me, is not to get their story so much as to help them out, because this is difficult for people sometimes. And we had a good long conversation, and he said, just want to tell you one more thing. my contact was this morning was Gray's. They told me to call you. I'm like, what? He says, no, they said your name.
So your name's out there.
Yeah, that's what Dolly Saffron had the same experience.
I guess all the contactees that you have worked with, maybe that's how your name's gotten out there. I didn't mean to interrupt your flow. I hate doing that with people. But how many contactees do you work with or have worked with?
It's a good few hundred at least. I mean, I've interviewed close to 1,000 people, but not all of them have been like formal interviews recorded, but definitely a few hundred have. So absolutely, I'm friends with a lot of people now who are having contact or have had contact. And that is absolutely a message a lot of them give. And I will say that the ETs are aware of, I mean, this is again my assessment. I know they're aware of me, but I'm sure they're aware of you and anyone who's into this to any degree, and have contacted large segments of the population, if not all of them, to some degree. They're absolutely aware of what's going on.
So with majority of the contactees that you have worked with, interviewed, which ETs are they mostly in contact with? If you had to sum it up to maybe just a few, and why just that particular race, and how many races of ETs are here and or communicating with these contactees?
Yeah, well, I'm going to it's a kind of a trick question, so I'm going to answer in a couple of ways.
Yeah.
They're not all that different. I've come to believe that they're all humanoid, right? And one of the messages that contactees get almost without fail is, you are us, we are you, we are one. It's mostly grays.
Mm-hmm.
But grays are essentially human. And I've come to believe they have the same basic genetics that we do. They're interbreeding with us. People, contactees have asked about this and have been told, yes, we have the same DNA you do. We looked like you at one point, but have suffered radiation damage or genetic interventions. So that's just an important point. Mostly grays. And I will say there's many different types of grays. I don't like to call them alien really, because I think that separates us from them. And our relationship to them is much closer than people realize. It's grays. There's lots of human looking ones out there. They look just like us, which again raises questions about human origins and our relationship to them. But it's grays mostly. I'd say 50, 60%, 70 even are grays. Then human looking mantids, but they're short blue beings. I've got many accounts of that. Tall whites, people call them, which are essentially very human looking, but not quite. I mean, they have hair, they're very tall, strange humanoids of every type that are just not quite human, but humanoid. They're all humanoid. So I think this shows just how much we are related to them. We're all part of the same template, I guess would be a good word to
it kind of even goes, I guess, to maybe Zechariah Sitchin's work or maybe the Sumerians with the Gigi, because I've heard many researchers say possibly the grays were the Gigi, the worker bees. How far back have they been here? Have some of these contactees told you? Have they been? So do you think that if we're like them, I wouldn't say they're like us, we're, I guess, like them in a lot of similar aspects, do you think that this hybridization program is nothing new really under the sun? It's been going on for a very long time, for centuries. And what's the full, I hate to say agenda, because a lot of people think of agenda being nefarious, but I guess what's the agenda for the hybridization program that's been going on? I know I'm asking a lot of things. I'm trying to, my mind's just racing with questions, but I hate to stop the flow with the guest, but what's your thoughts on that? What have the contactees described when it comes to how long have they been here, and what's the reasoning for the hybridization programs that's been going on. And I believe that has been going on for a very long time.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. I think just objectively looking at the evidence, we know they've been around for millennia. I mean, if you just look at cave paintings and hieroglyphs and petroglyphs and the writings from ancient India, the Vimyana.
Yeah.
The Egyptian culture is all about this. The native, indigenous cultures, I should say, all across the planet talk about how they believe that they are originating from the stars, from star people. They all have their different names for it, but it's pretty clear that this is what most cultures across our planet believe accounts for human origins. So we know just from an objective standpoint that they've been around for a very long time. I mean, we have Middle Age wood carvings. The Romans called them flying shields. We know this from writings. And it's pretty clear there have been other iterations of humanity in terms of, modern societies, not just Atlantis and Lemuria and this sort of thing, but multiple civilizations that have come and fallen. And ETs have probably been there as well. This is certainly what many contactees are being told. So yeah, they've been around since prehistory, well before recorded history, and are still around, as have we. So in terms of the hybridization agenda, again, yeah, that word does have negative connotations, and it really shouldn't, because it's just a plan, a program, or however you want to look at it. It's not experimentation. They're not here to take over or anything like that. David Jacobs, I think, is the leader of the pack in terms of, this is bad for us. They're going to take over our planet and eat us for lunch. And I don't see any evidence for that.
And they're going to direct traffic. Whenever Darren, that the hybrids are going to be, well, what does he say? Direct traffic or something. I forgot what he said, but yeah, I guess
he's in the minority, I would say, because people like John Mack and Barbara Lamb and
others. I would have loved to have interviewed John Mack, man.
Yeah.
But now, to play devil's advocate, are they taking people without their approval? And I'm kind of on the fence. I've talked to many people, interviewed, and people just behind the scenes, that there is nothing nefarious about it. But then you hear some that say that they didn't have a pleasant experience.
Right.
So maybe there's a little bit of both. Maybe let's say the Greys. Could the Greys be doing this hybridization program, taking people, and maybe let's say that they're the benevolent ones, and maybe there's a secret war going on behind the scenes, and maybe a different group of ETs, I don't know, the reptilians or whoever, could be taking others also and have their own type of program. What's your thoughts on that? Because I've also heard that, as crazy as it sounds, that the reptilians are, I don't know who I just made that up because I don't remember who I heard, which group of ETs are taking people and they're using the image of a gray, but they're not really grays. But anyways, I'm digressing. What's your thoughts on all that, Preston?
Yeah, well, just backtracking a little bit in terms of the hybrid agenda, I think it is true, and that the ETs are borrowing our genetics or using them to replenish theirs because of problems with radiation and reproduction. And I don't think that this is involuntary on our part. I think people who do have this experience have agreed to it. And they might not realize this, but most of the people I've talked to, the good, solid majority, say that yes, this is a good experience for them, which was often, if not usually, traumatic initially. So a lot of people do have, some trouble with this in the beginning. It can be very traumatic when grays walk in. And next thing you know, you find yourself laid out on a table and you're being examined and you're fighting them all the way, not understanding what's going on, not realizing that you've given permission for this.
Especially your first time, yeah.
So we see a bell curve of how people react. But if you look at the actual experiences that people are having, it's pretty consistent. And the very scariest, most evil thing, and I'll put that in quotes, that I hear is being physically examined and having instruments come down at you and you're fighting it all the way. And if you are having a very strong fear reaction, if you're in utter terror, you immediately conclude that this is bad, this is evil, you don't like it. No one likes to be frightened out of their minds. How could this possibly be good for you? And this is a real problem because it's complicated by the fact that there's this thing called MILABS, military abductions, which are evil and are bad and aren't ET. There is a government agenda to cloud the waters here and make this look like a negative phenomenon when it's not. I have yet to talk to any true contactee who's been the victim of sadistic behavior in any way. Let's just look at this objectively. What happens when people have contact? ETs come into your room. They say, don't be afraid. Have no fear. No harm will come to you. You're gonna be just fine. That's the number one most common phrase I hear. I can't tell you a contactee who hasn't heard this. And often people still have a strong fear reaction and they're pulled on board, right? And some have missing time. They're so afraid that they are better off not remembering it. And ETs will facilitate that.
Is a lot of this fear from propaganda through Hollywood films and stuff, probably?
Yeah.
Subconsciously, yeah.
Yeah. Let's face it, people guide, fear is a guiding force in people's lives. I mean, we all have locks on our doors. We're carrying weapons. We're scared of anyone who looks even slightly different because we've been trained that way. And this is very intentional on the part of, unfortunately, what I'll call the secret government, the cover-up folks, the military-industrial complex. It's the pharmaceutical industry, the banking industry, the oil industry, the top brass in the military who are behind all this. We know this. If you look into this, it's pretty clear who's behind this. The one percenters, you can call them what you want, the cabal. But it's clear that when someone has contact, what happens is not negative. It can be scary, yes, but if you don't have a strong fear reaction, you're gonna remember it. You're not gonna be paralyzed. You'll be given freedom of movement. And the purpose behind onboard experiences is largely healing. This ended up being the subject of my first book, UFO Healings. I got 100 cases right off the bat. I've now documented over 300. This is the purpose behind this examination. And this speaks to the hybrid agenda, or the, why they're following families and genetics and all this, because they're maintaining our genetics, which are failing due to the pollution and the collapsing magnetic fields of our planet.
GMO foods and yeah.
Exactly. So they're basically looking out for us. And this is the pattern of contact, physically examined. Then you have a tour of the craft. And I hear this all the time. They'll take you down to the engine room. Here's how we fly our craft. We harness the magnetic fields or the gravitational field lines. Something along those lines is what most contactees will hear. They'll take you up to the observation deck, or what I would call that. They turn the craft transparent and you look down on Earth. I'm like, there's Earth, there's the moon. I have case after case of people being taken to Saturn. It's crazy. This is absolutely what happens. They will counsel you. Like, what are you doing with your life? What direction of life are you taking? There's a very strong spiritual aspect to this that is not being covered in the media, which is very fear-based, and being ignored by a lot of nuts and bolts researchers. But it's absolutely the truth that ETs are very much concerned about us waking up to our own abilities, our own consciousness.
Our own true potential.
Exactly, because we have the ability to do telepathy, to do astral travel, clairvoyance, healing, remote viewing, all of this, precognition. And you'll see this as a pattern among contactees. They're really profoundly psychic. And there's a reason for that. ETs are attracted to that, and they will wake that up in a person. So if you look at all of this objectively, and they warn people, we already covered that a little bit, but just to underline it, they warn people about nuclear proliferation, pollution, greed and corruption, our warlike ways. Those are the main topics. And does that sound negative? No, these are not people. We have to realize what we're dealing with here, a very advanced group of people who have the ability to go anywhere they want in the universe, have access to any planet, all resources. Do you really think they're going to come down here and torture people and hurt them? That makes zero sense, especially if you look at what's actually happening. It's very much positive. Yeah, it can be scary. People do have trauma. They have PTSD and nightmares, but 80–90% of people who face it and go deal with their contact head on come through this realizing like, wow, this is amazing. This is the opportunity of a lifetime. It's changed my life for the better. They would not change this for the world. There's still, every 10th or 20th person I talk to feels it's demonic. It's often they're very religious and they're just
that programming.
I'm set on this. This is how I feel. And I understand, my heart goes out to people, particularly those who are MILABS. And that's a real problem because this is something our government is pushing really hard.
You think that's possibly with a lot of the missing people, Dave Pilates, in the national parks, while a lot of the people are going missing? You think that's a connection with the MILABS?
Possibly. I think there's probably a number of things going on there. I talked to David Pilates. He's a real interesting guy, really smart, and was before this missing 411 really kind of, became into the public awareness. I think there's a lot going on there. I think probably some of it is sex trafficking. I think some of it is people getting lost simply in the wilderness. I think some of it probably is specific government awful things that they're doing to people. And I think some of it is probably ET, and they're scooping people up and saying, you know what, you're better off on another planet. And I know how that might sound to skeptics or even people within this field, but there's a lot of cases. I have some of my own of that, where people were basically invited to go live with them. Dolly Saffron, the subject of my book, talks about this. And another lady in Maine who I interviewed who's had a lot of contact, she had a meeting with her full-grown hybrid son, and he said as much. He gave her a long conversation and said, basically, yes, we've been working with your DNA for generations. We're upgrading it. We're protecting it. They said, you need to tell people to stop putting out the greed and corruption you're putting out because you're on the verge of destroying your planet. They warned her about hurricanes upcoming. At that time, Katrina had just happened. They said, you're going to see a lot worse. They said they were not only intervening with human DNA, but specifically dogs and cats, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah.
They said that they were upgrading their emotional intelligence to help them interact better with humans, because they provide a lot of opportunities for us to learn love and interact that way. But they told her if people should go missing from this planet, this is almost a direct quote, it's being done by us for the universal good. So this is just another example of, I think, their agenda.
Is that because possibly if we self-annihilate ourselves, that maybe the human race will prevail and exist somewhere else?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, there's so many examples of this. Here's a case which I just love to talk about because I think it speaks towards what's truly going on with the onboard encounter experience. There's a gentleman by the name of Jim Law from Gainesville, Florida, who's had regular contact. Didn't really like it in the beginning. It was scary. Got kind of used to it after many encounters, and was in his home when Grays came and started to take him. He's like, hold up, I've got a hernia. If you're going to take me, why don't you just repair that? And they said, okay, we know of, what did they say? We know of this condition that you speak, and we will repair it. Almost a direct quote, slightly paraphrased perhaps. And they held up this little instrument and fixed him up. And he turns to them and said, why are you taking me? And they said, and this is a direct quote, we are interested in your genetic potential to live a long time. But, oh, this is kind of what John Mack is talking about with health upgrades. This is what many contactees have told me, like, geez, I'm in my 80s and my doctor says I have the heart of a 17-year-old. I've never had a cold and I have really good health. And it turned out Jim Law's grandfather was 106. His aunt lived to 103.
Wow.
Longevity in his family. And if you look at the human race in terms of longevity, it's what, doubled over the past couple of 100 years? From this hybrid program.
Since you're on that, glad you brought that up, Preston. If health and longevity is one of them, of the reasons behind all of this, why did we as the human species used to live a long time according to biblical accounts and other accounts back in the day, in ancient times? What happened back? Like, why did it just go from many hundreds of years to less than 100 years, less than 80, 60, or even a couple hundred years ago? People were, what was the average 40. Lifespan? Like, 40, 30, 40, 50 years old. So why this imbalance? Because if the accounts of, we actually used to, some of the biblical accounts and others, that we used to live a long time is true, why do we kind of devolve with our health and longevity? And do any contactees mention anything about that? And why not intervene a couple hundred years ago when it was really bad with the longevity, the lifespan? Or were they, and it just has taken up until now to work on it? What's your thoughts on that, Preston?
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to answer that with a whole lot of authority, honestly, because I have not studied that super in depth.
Yeah.
Contacted way back then. But I will say, Dolly Saffron talked a little bit about this, and other contactees said that we did not originate here. We lived on Mars initially, is what the ETs told her. And
Mars Earth connection, yeah.
Yeah, and we were basically facing an existential crisis there. So they transferred us here at a time where we were all telepathic and we were getting along and we were a peaceful race, but that devolved. And I'm not exactly sure why, but we lost the ability to, do telepathy, and our psychic abilities were dumbed down, and religion came into play and power struggles, and we just started this downward spiral that we have not gotten out of, largely to, greed and corruption and people on this planet who are making poor decisions, people in power, unfortunately. So I don't know. I really don't know. I would really like to know what happened that was sent us on such a terrible path.
Yeah, it's like we started here and kind of went down over the millennia, and then way down here, then we're kind of started creeping back up towards the 1900s, early 1900s, and but with the next 15 minutes or so with you, what do you, shifting gears just a little bit, I'm sure we'll bounce back a little bit, but what's your thoughts with all this? I even hate the word UAP. I don't know if you do, but I don't like it, man.
I'm not a fan.
It's just more of them trying to keep control of the narrative, so they don't want to say UFO because they were bashing people like us and so many others that used to say UFO. Now they have to control the narrative and create a new acronym. Trust me, I was military. I know there's shitload of acronyms, but but what's going on with all this, man? I want to pick your brain. What's going on with all these briefings? What something's going on, man. I just can't wrap my head around because I hear so many people, so many researchers that have their own theories and speculations and what's going on. A lot of these people that's coming forward, I'm not going to say any names, that government officials, ex-government officials, I don't trust them, man.
Me either.
You know what I mean? Like, why I don't trust them, Preston, is because a lot of these, they need a lot of these same people that's been in government over the past 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years, these lifetime bureaucrats, lifetime politicians, and just other government officials, military officials, and a lot of these people, not a lot, but some of these same rogue elements within the government, they were behind 9/11. They were behind a lot of other conspiratorial events. So why should I trust their narrative now when it comes to UAPs and their task forces? And I just can't wrap my head around, like, why now? Like, why are they coming forward now after all these years? What's their hand? What's their hand? What does your gut tell you, Preston?
Yeah. Well, you shouldn't trust him. I don't. I'll name a few names. Donald Menzel, who's now passed away, was clearly a disinformation agent. Phil Klass, I don't trust him either. I think there's some major players, major researchers who we all know who are not good people and are flat out lying disinformation agents. And I think there's some contactees who are, not contactees at all. There's absolute disinformation in this field. And I think the term UFO is itself unfortunate, but has come to mean extraterrestrial craft. Let's face it, that's what UFO means. UAP, I think, is an effort to get away from that when they know full well exactly what this is.
Stolen technology?
Well,
the UAPs possibly? That
UAP,
were shot down or
yeah,
what?
They're alien craft.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and yes, Roswell is absolutely real. You don't have to be a scientist to pick up a few books on Roswell and realize that, well, how many witnesses are there? 300-400 to that case alone. We tracked it from beginning to end. And it's one of hundreds of crash retrieval reports across the US and the world. Yes, we have this technology. We have the bodies. Our government has known what this is since the early 1940s. I mean, there was the Cape Girardeau incident in Missouri in 1942. There's, throughout the 1940s, there's a bunch of UFO crashes, 50s and 60s for that matter. They know what it is. And now we have these congressional hearings, right, which are a reversal of policy, because Blue Book and the Connon Committee and the Robertson panel all said, you think you saw a UFO? No, you didn't. You're lying. You're hoaxing. You're misperceiving. There is no such thing. They don't represent a national security threat because they don't exist. Shut up. You are an idiot. That was their policy, official government policy. And now, come 2021, 22 rolls around, and these films are getting leaked, and the information has now reached a saturation point where the population, the majority of them, believes that this is a real phenomenon. And our government has lost control of the narrative. So I think that the only reason, the driving force behind disclosure, is for them to regain control of the narrative. Because if they don't, they will 100% lose credibility. They already have. Their record on this subject is heinous. It
Mhm.
applies since day one. And the congressional hearings were a joke. Yes, they used the term extraterrestrial once or twice, backpedaled all the way through, saying, oh, maybe it's China, maybe it's Russia.
They didn't know
Maybe,
anything about Maelstrom.
yeah,
They didn't know anything because it got brought up, didn't it?
sure did.
And they didn't like we don't have any record or whatever they said. They basically didn't know anything about it. Bullshit.
100% absolute lie. They're defense intelligence. They know. They completely, passed off Roswell. They were asked flat out, have you ever shot at this? They both said, no, real quick. That's a demonstrable lie. The Battle of LA, 1942, 1,500 rounds of ammunition. We know that they've shot them throughout the 1950s. There was an order, shoot them down. Read the book by Frank Frascino. It's very compelling. And they were talking, oh, we have 144 cases of sightings. Well, now we have 400. It's interesting that you're talking about sightings, but not talking about the hundreds upon hundreds of landing trace cases, the hundreds of radar return cases, the photographic evidence,
Mhm.
all the eyewitness reports of direct contact, the crash retrieval reports, the implant removal cases. What you're talking about, this little dot that took you 10 minutes to stop frame on and was probably a balloon anyway. It's infuriating. I think that they are pushing forth their lying agenda and disclosing only as much as they can to keep control of the narrative as much as they can. I think they're making a huge mistake. I think they've bungled this badly. And I think there is an alien threat, and it's to them. It's to their power structure. It's to their control over the masses. It's to their narrative that this is a threat, because it's not. It's a threat to them and their money and their control over us. I don't trust them. They're liars. And not only in the UFO field, but in many subjects across society. This is our governments. If you look at the history of our governments, it's not good.
Mm-mm.
They're poisoning our population. They've radiated soldiers. They've sterilized people. They've fed them hallucinogenics.
Mhm.
Look at Camp Lejeune right now, this big lawsuit where all these poor people are poisoned. What, they didn't know? Really? I'm
Yep.
not happy with how this subject has been handled at all. And they're paying
And
the price.
I was military police, and I knew a lot of these intelligence officers. Not real personal, but I knew enough of them. There was a lot of talk, and my soon to be baby girl that will be coming soon, I wouldn't let her stay over their house. Like a lot of these people, I'm not saying all, because there's good people, very patriotic people that trying to do the good thing, you know.
Absolutely, yeah.
100%. But a lot of these people, man, that I've met and worked alongside, they're dirtbags, man. Like just some of the things you would hear them talk about. I'm not saying just military, I'm talking about intelligence officers too, you know. Um, like, but that I'm getting off, but yeah, you're exactly right. Um, so why do you think that you kind of talked about it, but why? I just don't understand the reasoning for, because obviously I believe that these UAPs is ours, just like you stated also. But why bringing them forward now? Are they trying to? Is it testing their, yes, to control the narrative and make it think that it's that? I understand that, but
Yeah, I
are
think it's
they
worse than that, actually.
do what?
It's worse than that. It's not just controlling the narrative. I mean,
Yeah,
there's a
but
lot of buzz in the field about false flag coming up.
exactly,
Uh,
exactly. And I was about to say, will they use a lot of these? Could they use these on legit UFOs, extraterrestrial crafts in the future? Or how when new wars come out, the newest and best technology always comes forward. What why is because why is this UAP nonsense coming through? I guess it's just getting stronger every day. I guess what's the purpose for them creating this craft, and why will they deceive us or make us believe that they have no idea what's going on? Elaborate a little bit on that, Preston. I know I'm kind of bouncing, but it's just so confusing, man. You just don't know who to believe, who to trust. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a really unfortunate situation. And I think part of the problem is that they've been dirtbags from the beginning. They've been covering this up from the beginning. They've, adopted this policy of looking down at the population as expendable. And they believe themselves to be superior. And I hate to say this, but this is what I think is going on, that there is an element within our population who are not good, who are basically making evil decisions, very poor decisions, and are doing their level best to save themselves and screw everyone else over. And I do think that they're developing this technology. I don't think they're going to be able to beat the ETs. Got to remember, ETs are so far more evolved than us. They're not only technologically evolved, they're spiritually evolved, ethically, morally, super advanced, psychically. They can do stuff that we simply cannot do. They know what everyone is doing. They are on top of things. There's no way we have a chance against them in terms of a war. They're not warring with each other. We are the ones who are warring. We are the ones who are the problem. And anyone who thinks ETs are coming down to take over is imposing their own cultural norms. I don't even want to call them that, but that's our own cultural values, aggression and divisiveness and hatred and greed on a culture that doesn't even have that. There's no galactic federation, there's no money, there's no federalized system. They cooperate with each other. And it's our governments who, this is not my area of expertise. I'm much more involved with the Contactee, but I watch very closely what's going on with the cover up and the government agenda with this, because it's clear that they're ramping this up. Disclosure is very tightly controlled. And it's clear they do have an agenda to portray this as a negative experience. And it's clear we do have this technology, and I'm afraid they're going to masquerade as genuine UFOs and basically stage an alien invasion on the population.
False flag you was just talking about. Yes, I was just about to mention that. Yeah,
that I think is what the purpose behind their behavior is.
So there will be a fake, let's say a fake disclosure. Maybe, I don't know, one scenario, a fake disclosure, a year, 2, 10 years, whenever they want to. Okay, we finally are admitting that extraterrestrials exist, and they're going to, but we didn't tell you over the years because of national security.
Right.
And then shortly after, I don't know, years after that or months or whatever, these Tic Tacs or other UAPs are going to invade some city, whatever, to control the narrative even more. And then what are they going to do to control the narrative? They're going to blame it on the ETs.
Yep. Exactly. Well, look at what happened in Colares in Brazil decades ago. That UFOs came down and started beaming people and causing all kinds of radiation sickness, and people died. And there was a main researcher who was looking into this, and he came to the conclusion it was government. He's dead.
Who is that? Who is that researcher?
God, I don't know his name. I'd have to look it up. But this is absolutely, you can look this up. The Colares incident, series of encounters is fairly well known. I honestly think that was a false flag operation. I think a number of researchers have come to that conclusion. You can look at the cattle mutilations as another example.
Oh yeah.
Where if you look at, Gabe Valdez, he was one of the head cattle mute researchers. Before he died, he said, "This is government. Government is going to have to pay for this. This is not ETs doing this. This is what Larry Fawcett and Barry Greenwood said. They were also early reporters on this. And it's another example of this false narrative and this false flag. I talked to Dolly Saffron about this because she, has direct contact with them. And I'm like, what do you think of the cattle mutes? She says, it's not the ETs. Tell you 100%, they do not do that. And this is what I've learned from other contactees. So that's where, my research is focused. So like, why haven't ETs landed? Because it's up to us to solve our own problems. They could hand over healing technology, but what would we do with it? We would abuse it. We would instantly overpopulate. We don't have control of our own society. And when we can start electing leaders who have morals, when we can stop polluting our own planet, when we can stop killing each other in large numbers, then we're going to have open official contact. But we are so far ethically and morally behind them that we have a long way to grow up before we're going to be welcomed into their community. So it's a real problem right now. And we're at a point now where we're facing an existential crisis in terms of humanity might not live long on the path we're on. And this is why contactees are getting the message that we have to shape up right now or it'll be too late. And this is why I think ETs are coming down and like, wake up. You have to become psychic. Your life depends on it.
And I usually like to end on a good note, because yes, there's a lot of deceit going on. There's a lot of nefarious things going on behind the scenes within our own government. But I guess give me what your gut tells you, maybe some contactees have told you. Is the human race, is there hope for us down the road? Can we win this? Can we win this war, this silent war that's going on behind the scenes and deliberately in our face, which a lot of people just can't see it? Is there hope for us moving forward as a race? And can we be victorious over, this battle with the light versus the dark?
Yeah, well, I'm an optimist by nature. I'm always kind of a hopeful guy. And I think I'm looking at the progress we've made so far over the past couple of 100 years in terms of human rights and treating animals correctly and, allowing equality among the races. I won't even call them races because we're all the same race, but, ancestry, I guess would be the better word. And, woman versus men, in terms of how women were treated for millennia. Oh God, it's terrible. We're seeing a lot of really good progress. We're seeing a lot of people wake up. I think that there is hope for humanity. Absolutely. I'm not so sure we're at the point where we're still going to pay some dues for how far off track we've gone. But each person has an effect. And if each person can just stop believing the lies, move away from fear, live your life guided by compassion, joy, and truth, we're going to be just fine. People need to start meditating. They need to start waking up and using your abilities. We can do this. We can just lay down our arms and stop killing each other, stop poisoning ourselves, drinking fluoridated water and taking all these prescription drugs and genetically modified foods, move off grid and become independent and stop depending on our lying governments. Yes, we can absolutely do this. I think it's going to be a rough road, but ultimately, if it does go down to an existential crisis, we'll be fine because ETs are out there. They are our friends. They will pick people up. They are picking people up. And the human race is in no danger of going extinct. That's for sure. The contactee phenomenon is far more widespread than people realize. Jalen Hynek, the father of modern ufology from Project Blue Book, who defected, thank God, said 1 in 40 people are having contact. The Roper poll, 1991, found 1 in 50. And I've talked to contactees who feel it's much more than that. So this is good news. Yeah, we may have some rough times ahead, but the good news is this way of life that we're living now, with the greed and corruption and the unequal distribution of wealth, is not sustainable. And we're looking at a real possibility of getting on the right path and doing it right. If not this time, then the next time around. You don't have to worry about dying, because that's a lie too. Death is not true. We just transform. We go into the other side, the astral realms, and come back down. This is absolutely verifiable if you look into it. The paranormal, so-called paranormal, is connected to this. It's just important that people move away from fear and don't buy into the lies, and we'll be just fine. Yeah, I'm hopeful. I think we're going to be great. I'm really excited about what the future is bringing. We might be welcomed into the galactic community, and it's going to be
awesome.
Yeah, it's going to be fantastic.
Well, Preston, I really appreciate it. It was a treat, an honor, and I will maybe sometimes in 2023, got a lot coming up the next couple of months. Maybe I'll try to get you back on sometimes in 2023, and we can touch on some things. You have a lot of books that have a lot of knowledge, a lot of contactees that come to you, given a lot of stories. And but yeah, I'll try to get you back on and pick your brain some more, because there's a lot of things that we left out. But man, it was a treat, an honor, privilege, and I thank you very much, man.
Hey, it's an honor and a treat for me too. So I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks very much.